Okay, so we're on to chapter 7, and this is a very, very important chapter, leader development in times of change. Again, earlier in a previous chapter, I talked about how whenever you have change, you have leadership. It's not management, it's leadership. Remember, management, according to Cotter, was trying to add stability, okay? Whereas leadership is dealing with change. So anytime you're trying to deal with change as opposed to stability in a complex environment, you're going from point A to point B, and that's what we're doing here. So let's move along here and look at what we're trying to talk about. Challenges of leading during transition. It is challenging. What it takes to lead effectively during a transition, and then developing authentic change leadership. And the key word here is authentic change leadership. And we'll talk about the wheel as well. Let's start with this quote. Authentic leadership is critical, but it is difficult to bring out the requisite levels of self-awareness, openness, and vulnerability in leaders who are themselves caught up in an emotional loop that can cycle between fear and paralysis, anger and resistance, resiliency and recovery. Again, self-awareness is important. We have to know ourselves. Openness, being able to open authentically and be open and authentic with our people, and being vulnerable. It's hard to be vulnerable when people are counting on you, but we need to do that. The context, challenges of leading during a transition. So here we talk about the challenge of understanding the emotional shape of the transition. Now, emotional, this is important. Very often we're very comfortable in business dealing with rational this or rational that, but people are emotional, and if you discount let me put it like this, it's irrational to discount the emotional nature of people, okay? The challenges of fear, which stem from emotion, okay? And the challenge to learn. Developing the capacity to lead in the face of change is about cultivating leadership. Now here's the word cultivating leadership is very important, as a way of being rather than a template for doing. Okay, so here I want to focus on this again. I'm going to read it again. And developing the capacity to lead in the face of change is about cultivating leadership. That is growing people, growing leadership, growing others as a way of being rather than a template for doing. Not just doing the right things. Too often we want this checklist. I do this and I do this and I do this and I do that and see how it works. But being is really what's important. Being a particular thing or being a particular way is going to be what is going to inspire people and motivate them. Leading others through turbulent times requires understanding how they react to it emotionally. And we already talked about that, so I won't belabor the point of emotionally. Now, there's these phases of transition where, you come to this point where something happens, whatever that thing happens. So the plant is closing and we're moving these people from here to there. Let's say that's what the issue is. The first phase is denial. Then comes resistance. Then you hit this kind of valley of chaos. You bottom out in what they call a neutral zone. And then you start to work your way back up to the surface thinking, well, what would happen in this scenario and how is it going to be? And ultimately you get to commitment, and then you come out of it into this new beginning. That's the phases, but there's this V shape in this transition, and you have to go down through it first before you can come back up. Okay, that's just the reality of how humans function. Fear magnifies, and again, please listen to this. If you were tuning out, please hear this carefully. Fear magnifies existing insecurities and has the potential to create demons even where none exists. Now, I can't remember where this was, but there was another book that I was using in class that was talking about how, if you're in this kind of situation where there's fear and it's magnifying these existing insecurities, if you're just not communicating, you're creating a problem by allowing these demons where none exist. Essentially, it was the same kind of thing. If you're just not communicating, you're allowing people to wonder what's going on. The context, challenges of leading during a transition. The challenge to learn. Change produces learning, and learning produces growth. Okay? So change is going to be the thing that creates learning, and learning is going to be the thing that creates growth. It's just one thing leading to another, leading to another. Not only so, but also we glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope, said the Apostle Paul in Romans 5:3-4. It's the same kind of process. Now, here's a chart that talks about how the dynamics of the learning experience work. So you're going along and you've been learning something, and eventually you level off at a certain place, and then you hit smack into a learning opportunity. Now, this opportunity may not be something that you want to learn. It may be some hardship that you're running into. And when you do, it's going to lead to stress and discomfort, and your performance will likely drop as you adjust to it. Okay? However, as you adjust to it, your performance goes back up as you recover, and then you go back through the same cycle again. It's not a cycle like there's this cycle. You can keep going up and up and up in this process, but once you hit that challenge, whatever that is, it's likely that your performance is going to drop for a little bit. Now, what it takes to lead effectively during a transition. It talks about the pivotal role of trust. And we already talked about trust in another chapter, but here we're going to really emphasize trust because it's so critically important. We're going to talk about the emotional side, meeting people where they are, and the paradoxical power of vulnerability. Trust is important. Let me magnify this and just say, if you cannot earn trust within your organization, just pack it up and go on somewhere else, because you're not going to be effective. Here's what we mean by trust. In the book, The Steward Leader, R. Scott Roden writes, "You get what you give. When we trust, we are trusted. When we doubt, we are doubted. When we give the benefit of the doubt, we receive the benefit of the doubt." This is the same thing that Kouzes and Posner talk about. They say, if you're going to try to create a climate of trust, you have to invest in trust. Be the first to trust the other person. When you trust the other person reciprocates and trusts you. Leaders go first. So as you're the leader, you have to trust your people. Trust is also contagious, properly so. It's as you give that trust, it's returned, and it becomes a reciprocal cycle. Show concern for others, and then share knowledge and information. And when you do not share knowledge and information, they become more and more distrustful of you. Even if you're not doing anything, even if you're totally above board, because they don't know what's going on, it creates a climate of distrust. Stephen Covey, in The Speed of Trust, talks about how trust is a function of character and competence. And he talks about how as trust decreases, speed decreases, and costs increase. He calls this a trust tax. As trust increases, speed increases, and costs decrease. And he calls this a trust dividend. And he talks about 5 waves of trust. And these are self-trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, market trust, and then finally societal trust. And one is built into the other, into the other, into the other, all the way through till societal trust. Now, the quickest way to decrease trust is to violate your character and your behavior, right? People may have liked Bill Clinton, but they didn't trust him because, particularly after the Monica Lewinsky affair, he had clearly lied to the American people, and there's a problem. You saw President Obama's polls drop significantly after, the healthcare, where he said, you can keep your healthcare if you like it. And then what turned out to be, whether he meant it to or not, what turned out there was that no, you couldn't, and millions of people were kicked off. George Bush Sr. Had the same kind of effect. Well, when he said, read my lips, no new taxes, and then he increased taxes. Same kind of function, the same kind of dynamic operates in an organization as well, where if you are less than genuine, you're going to cause that kind of problem in the organization. So the quickest way to increase trust is to demonstrate competence. Now, there are 13 behavioral traits of high trust leaders. These include, in sets, character behaviors like talking straight. Right? John McCain named his campaign bus the Straight Talk Express, and that was a good idea. People love Chris Christie when he curses at him and tells him, get the beep off the beach, right? Because he's talking straight. It's kind of rare for politicians. Demonstrate respect, create transparency, right wrongs, show loyalty. Competence behaviors include things like delivering results, getting better, confronting reality, clarifying expectations, and practicing accountability. If you're not competent, we don't trust you. If you don't have character, we don't trust you. And then there's a group of both character and competence behaviors like listening, keeping commitments, and extending trust. And when you do that, you create an environment of trust. Now, trust is interesting, and particularly because I was looking at this book, and as I was reading it, I was thinking, this didn't sound like Stephen Covey. I've read other books like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then I realized, wait a minute, This is Stephen M.R. Covey. This is his son talking, not Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People guy. And, you know, just because it kind of duped me like that, I had to re-examine all the things that he said. Now, he may not have meant to trade on his father's name, but it was just too close in the way that it was put out, the book cover, and so I missed it. That's my fault. But if you kind of are duplicitous like that, you create trust. Now, everything he said was right, but I had to go back and reevaluate it. So be really careful with that. So the pivotal role of trust, in the form of trust most often considered in an organization, is interpersonal trust. This is what Covey talked about as relationship trust. Especially in hard times, the very outcome of leadership, direction, alignment, and commitment, that's the core of what is leadership, are constantly judged and processed through an authenticity filter. Okay? Being authentic. Perceived imperfections are illuminated and magnified, especially if people think that you're hiding something or not being totally truthful. Leaders have a tendency to overfocus on direction and alignment to the detriment of gaining and maintaining commitment. Remember, commitment's important. Leaders do this sometimes. Bad managers do this all the time when they try to control the environment rather than elicit commitment. Here's what I mean. Here's commitment versus control. Control is productivity is a function of the percent of time your butt is in the chair divided by your workday. Okay, so let's say we're trying to measure productivity. So we're going to say, you know, you got to make sure you're in your seat. Because if we think that it's a function of time divided by the time that you're in your chair, or in your chair divided by the workday, well, then it's a function of, say, 6.5 hours in your chair divided by 8. Hey, you are 81.25% productive today. But is that really what means that you're productive? I mean, it may be hard to work while you're not in your chair, but maybe you're getting information from somebody or collaborating with a colleague or something else. This isn't an accurate measurement, and here's why. Control is aided by monitoring, by rules about wasting time, by tracking software where Big Brother is watching, or surveillance cameras, weekly progress charts, sign in and sign out badges, time cards, things along those lines. If you have a controlling mentality, you're going to think these are wonderful ideas. But commitment is a function of the percentage of work completed. In a commitment mindset, productivity is a function of the percentage of work completed divided by total work. And that has really nothing to do with the time that your butt's in your chair. So you don't want to have all these other devices. You're actually trying to just make sure that they have the tools that they need in order to be successful. So what it takes to lead successfully during a transaction, you have to meet people where they are, how they function, realize that they are emotional and that they need information and they just want to know things just like you would want to know things if you were in charge. You know, understand that they have emotions and that they're human. There's a great quote in the text, as one human resource vice president put it, "I don't want my CEO to understand emotions. I want him to have some." Right? That's the kind of person that we want to follow. So in the book, they talk about the authentic leadership paradox wheel. And here in the center is trust. And then on one side, you might have realism and openness balanced by optimism, or self-reliance balanced by trusting others, or going against the grain balanced by capitalizing on strengths. But again, it's a balancing act. What you want to do is have some of each, not be way off on one side or the other. Internal conflict is often reflected in the wearing of protective masks in the organization. For example, they may try to be superhuman in the face of fatigue and dwindling resources, act positive, upbeat, optimistic on the outside while feeling frustrated, disenchanted, and impotent on the inside. And you know, when people are like that, what's happening? We're no fools. We know that something is going wrong and they're hiding it from us, and it creates distrust. Leaders know, so you can't be like that. And the chapter ends with this pretty good line here. Leaders will know that they're truly engaging others when conversation ceases to be about unnamed others and it then turns into revelations about oneself. Now, there's an interesting book, and I'm going to reference it in other places, All In. And in the book, they were talking about the average employee spends 24 days of the year complaining about mismanagement. Isn't that awful? 24 days. That's almost a month complaining about management. Now, that's not where you want to be. And you're not going to be there if you are an authentic leader, and you're an authentic leader when you realize that your people have emotions, that you need to be able to show your emotions in a proper professional way, but that you need to communicate what's there and do it as a real human being, not trying to be Superman and guarding the truth from them as if you're a parent keeping something from kids. Okay? That's all for this chapter. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll talk to you in chapter 8.